All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of Texans Unfiltered, a Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans. I am young Ari Gold, and I am here with my friend and co-host John Wade, the Garnet Texan. And well, John, it was strange last night, just like the outpouring love and support that we got from all of our listeners after 6 years of recording. Obviously, we took the season off. I mean, we tried to come back. I think we did an episode after the Colts game. Then after that, it just was
Jaguar.
it the Jags win, maybe?
Yeah, we talked about that. And then,
Yeah.
you know,
And then life. I mean, honestly, it really boils down to life more than, like, at least for me, not just like the Texans being terrible. Like, yeah, Texans being terrible doesn't help the situation in any way, but like also just life is busy, man. Like life is busy. You're working in a new career. You have life altering stuff. I was promoted at work. I'm working a lot more. Kids are getting older, taking a lot more time. Just lots of different things I think are happening. But it's crazy that last night was just like a bunch of support and love, which is amazing to see. It honestly is. It still wows me to this day when I see tweets like that of people wanting us back and that they've been dying to have us put an episode, and that every week was what they look forward to, and that they were passing it to their brothers and friends, and just all the cool shit that people were saying. And every time we get together, it comes up every time. I mean, it's not like it's something that just like isn't ever discussed or talked about. It's brought up every time we do get together. It's just timing is a big thing, and us with what we have going on in life in general, it's not always the easiest thing. But the fact that JJ Watt announced his retirement the day after all of that is just it's like come full circle to an extent that, like, our first episode was Andre Johnson, a tribute episode to him being in the Ring of Honor, and now we're here with, I think most people would probably say the best Texan to ever be a Houston Texan. I think it's debatable. I'd probably still go Dre over JJ. I think it's hard to quantify what JJ means to the city, though, in comparison to what Dre means to the city. Obviously, JJ is going to – there's an emotional aspect associated with JJ that will never be associated probably with another player in sports.
I would take a step back on that just a little bit. With JJ, definitely there is an emotional attachment. And the problem with comparing him to Andre is Andre Johnson came about and was successful when fantasy football first started taking off. And through no fault of his own, he didn't score a lot of touchdowns. So I think that led to him being perennially underrated. Like, he's a better football player than he was a fantasy football player. He's a better receiver than he was a fantasy football receiver. Like, I don't think people outside Houston, and even some people that inside Houston that would always put him on their fantasy teams, really get how good Andre is. But with JJ, the way that he played his position was completely independent of others. So that's why. Like, I don't think it's any malice. I don't think it's any underlying current. But that's just why. Now, with JJ, he was also had a streak that what was it, for 4 years? Like
3
years where he was just, he was 3-time defensive player of the year, but he had a streak of 4 or 5 years where he was just the best player on the field, like, consistently.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, but I also think that, and the part that think people don't bring up when it comes to Dre is also just the fact that it was a new franchise. It was it was an expansion team 3 years. Excuse me. 3 years after being drafted to the Texans. Not a lot of success was going to happen early on. It's very rare for an expansion team like the Carolina Panthers to come in and then immediately have success and go to the Super Bowl. There's lots of things that need to be ironed out, and so I do think that, like, Dre holds that in the sense of he was the first one for anybody to gravitate towards. He was the first reason why people became a Texans fan. So yeah, I mean, it's semantics. It's a preference at this point. At the end of the day, both of them are great. Can't take away from either one of them for what they were as a Houston Texan. Um,
And I mean, I'd
and you
honestly
know,
hate to turn this into a conversation on like who's better than who. You know, like that's
yeah,
not
no,
that's not really the point. Like for a lot of us, especially for those of us that for a good portion of the Texans' existence were outside of Texas, and it was just impossible to watch the Texans. Like all the coverage was always around JJ, and he made the Texans watchable. And there was an extent where, I mean, even because Andre was always so dependent on quarterback, and our offense wasn't great, that without JJ Watt, like what was the reason to turn in? Now we had a great offense for a time with Andre and Arian Foster, and we were putting up numbers, but we also had some bad offenses where JJ was literally the star of the show because there was no one else to watch.
yeah, yeah, no. I mean, look, JJ definitely transformed the Texans in a way that Andre didn't, and like you said, it's not a conversation of who is better because they both are great in their own separate ways. But yeah, I mean JJ's career, what he accomplished on the field, if we just look at it from a football perspective, there's a real argument to be had about JJ Watt potentially being the best defensive player to ever play the game, to a top three defensive player all time to play the game. I know recency bias has Aaron Donald above JJ Watt. I think a lot of people forget what JJ Watt actually did on the field. I also think, the Texans were never very good. And Aaron Donald is on an LA team that, gets a ton of press, has the coach, has the city, won a Super Bowl. Like Aaron Donald has had the spotlight on him, and he is an amazing player. Do not, he's right there. But JJ Watt was honestly just a different beast. What JJ could do on the field was, I saw a tweet from Mitchell Schwartz earlier talking about, I mean, it was a 300-pound guy who had speed, had power, and had an understanding of how to jump the snap count in a way that he's never experienced. He was unblockable. JJ was just, he could single-handedly change the outcome of a game, as we've seen many times.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he won us a playoff game. I mean, that was his rookie year against Andy Dalton and the Bengals. Like, just took the ball, scored a touchdown. That at the time was really the high point of being a Texans fan. I mean, no matter whom else you watched or no matter what else was going on the field, like that moment may be hard to top. I mean, we just hadn't had anything. We hadn't had anything like that. And then for a defensive player to just literally snatch the ball, like that was such a great moment. Like I still get chills thinking about it. And I was hardly old enough to even understand truly what was going on. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, JJ, without a doubt, first ballot Hall of Famer, without a doubt. Even though people gave him a lot of shit for maybe not being as transparent as he needed to with Hurricane Harvey relief, when the numbers actually came out and when it was fully transparent and they actually showed everything they did, it was absolutely amazing. And then if you go outside of Houston, ask anybody outside of Houston, just name a player from Houston in any sport. Does not matter. Any sport. Odds are they're going to know who JJ Watt is. Maybe nobody else other than, somebody else that got in the news for other reasons, but other than JJ Watt for just like positive reasons, like thinking in a Texans uniform, somebody that maybe doesn't watch football other than the Super Bowl. I still remember having to correct people even as recently as this year because they weren't football fans, thinking that JJ was still with the Texan. Like he's just that tied to the franchise, to the Papa John boxes, to the commercials, to even when he was, it was a little cringe watching him on Hard Knocks, but at the same time, like he was a star. Like you could see it. I mean, maybe a little bit of a cringy star, but he was a star. And I honestly think that if he is truly retired, like I wouldn't put it past him to do what Chris Long did, where he kind of marks and waits till the end of the season until somebody needs a pass rusher. Like I wouldn't put it past JJ to maybe do that a little bit. Um, Maybe we'll see. I mean, he may just want to sit back and be a father and is tired of being hurt all the time, but he may still get the itch. He may come back for somebody and help them go get a ring. But if he is truly retired, he will be the first ambassador for Houston sports that we've truly ever had because he's going to be on TV somewhere. I mean, he's going to be, you know how the Cowboys have Tony Romo and Troy Aikman? Like JJ Watt's going to be our first person along those lines. The first person that's going to be in a studio somewhere, whether he's covering the sports or even if it's Good Morning America, whatever he chooses to do. Like he'll be able to represent the Houston Texans, and they're not going to show him in the Cardinals. Nobody remembers him in the Cardinals. Next year, nobody's going to remember him in the Cardinals. Like it'll always be the Houston Texans with JJ Watt.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there are so many moments on the field that JJ had, and it's really going to be interesting to see what he does after, because I mean, I could see a scenario where it's just being a dad and being a husband. I could easily see that. Probably back here in Houston. I could see a scenario where he goes to Amazon Prime or CBS or Fox or ESPN or wherever it may be and is a broadcaster. I could see a scenario where HBO gives him his own little special sports show. I mean, the guy is entertaining. You reference Hard Knocks. Like, was part of that super cringe? Absolutely. Was also part of that just JJ Watt? I believe so.
Thanks for calling it cringe. Even JJ Watt said it was a little cringy.
Yeah, and
he owned it, and that's actually one of the things that I defended him about, because I mean, you got tired of his act. There was a little bit of a backlash because he did come across as Captain America, like he legitimately did, but at the same time, he would admit to things being a little bit cringy. He would admit, he's like, you know what, I was trying to play that up for the camera. Like he would, and I do respect him for that. And he even admits with Hard Knocks, like he was playing it up for the camera. He says that like the first couple of seasons where he would let blood run down his face, he admitted that he would kind of let it do that for the camera, for his persona, and then his mom asked him not to, so he stopped. Again, and all that actually furthers your point about him trying to be, or maybe being a little bit too much of Captain America, but I mean, that's who he was. And yeah, he's going to be on TV for something. Will it be this year or next year? Who knows? But when he wants to come back, yeah, he's going to be on TV.
Yeah, I can't see a scenario where he just kind of rides off in the sunset. I mean, I understand going and being a dad, but at the end of the day, like he's made a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more on the table for him. If you look at what Tony Romo made, like JJ Watt's probably in that same category of a financial benefit from one of these broadcast companies. Who knows? He could probably start his own thing. He could do his own podcast and talk to TJ and Derek. Like there's just so many different avenues that this guy can go on.
Yeah, I mean, something like Real Sports where he just goes around and does charity all the time. Like who knows? Like he's going to do something. I mean, there was a couple of years back where everybody thought he was going to be in movies. Like he was going to be the next, like, I don't know, Sly Stallone or somebody. We don't have action stars anymore. It'd be nice to see somebody other than a wrestler trying.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. He said acting was something he wanted to do early on. So, yeah, look, it's going to be very interesting. But, like, when we talk about J.J. Watt, the football player, this guy was just so disruptive. Honestly, I don't know if there's a better word to describe his play on the field. I mean, he really was just a true disruptor. For anybody that watched the Glass Onion on Netflix, the group, the Disruptors, J.J. Watt was exactly that. He could instantly come in and just take over. He could take over on defense single-handedly, which is just truly insane. And then when you talk about like DJ Reader and the development DJ Reader had, and actually what JJ, how JJ played a hand in that, and their friendship still to this day. We never got to really see the merciless, clowny Watt defense as often as we would have liked. But man, it would have been scary to see if they all would have been healthy at the same time. What could have been?
You know,
Um,
if they could have all been healthy and really bought in all at the
yeah,
same time, that would have been something else. Like that'll be one of the biggest what ifs in Houston sports. Um, no, I mean J.J. Watt. They created essentially his own position for him. Like his responsibilities were nothing like any other defensive line. For a player to play, he played defensive end, but he would line up essentially as a nine tech, like essentially as an outside linebacker, and they would let him. And he had seasons where he was not only the number one pass rusher, he was also the number one run stopper. And people, I mean, as he got older and got a little bit banged up, like he couldn't do the things that he used to do. But there was that stretch though where he was just an absolute wrecking ball that could do anything on the field.
yeah. And then when you talk about just what he did on the field, but off the field, like I tweeted out a video of him playing catch with Parker. Like, dude, that's one of those things that, like, honestly, Parker still brings up to this day. I mean, he's 10; he'll be 11 in July. It's something he still talks about. Like, it's not every day that you get to play with an NFL Hall of Fame superstar defensive end and play catch with him at a stadium prior to a game that you're attending to watch. Like, those types of things were truly just insane, considering like that season that he did it. It was the last season of Bill O'Brien. Like, there was so much turmoil and so many issues, and yet there he was, still with a smile on his face, making sure that he made the day of a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
At that time,
he'd be out there with a cast on his hand. He'd be out there in a sling, still playing catch, still meeting the fans. They talked about during Hurricane Harvey, where he was actually late to training camp because he would sit there and he would just keep talking to the victims, and he wouldn't leave because he knew as long as he was there, people would continue to come in and donate. I again, who know? I mean, with JJ Watt, I get the backlash. Like I get it. But at the same time, have always been one of those guys that wants to believe that's just genuinely who he was. Like when you sit there and you really think about it, when he goes out there, he plays catch with all the kids. Like when he's hurt, like when you're in a sling and you're sitting there and you're still just underhanding a ball and you're running around, that still hurts. Like if you've ever been in a sling or if you've ever been restrained, like okay, broken hand, nah, okay, whatever. Like I can see why people say no, that's not a big deal. But when he was in a sling doing it, like that was awesome. Like when he had messed up his knee and he was still out there with a patella fracture, one of the most painful injuries apparently known to man. Like talking to people that have gone through it and reading up on it, it is apparently just one of the most awful things that you could ever go through. And he was still, interacting with people. Like he still reached out and was helping out kids that year, like just through Twitter. Like with all the things that could have gone wrong with his career, like he was still looking out for other people. And it's almost a shame. Like maybe it's Arizona, maybe it's just him being out of the spotlight, but you haven't heard as much about him in Arizona. Also with him being hurt, but he was still doing those things even out there. But I mean, he's the one guy that whatever he chooses to do in the Houston area, he could do. If he wants to be governor of Texas, Houston would vote him in. Like we would make sure that he was in. Now, where does he go from now? It'll be interesting to watch. And I talked about it a little bit. Do you think that he's 100% done?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, he's talked about it before. He's had these thoughts for a while. He's also having a pretty good season, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. He'll probably finish top 15, top 20 edge rushers in the NFL. He's very productive. I think he just knows that, like, one, Cliff's probably gone. Kyler Murray really isn't the quarterback that he thought he was. Like, there's really no chance at winning next year. And it's like, how many more years do I want to keep kicking that can down the road?
He went
I
through.
want to win, but like, if I can't, then I can't. And I don't think, I think with his wife and the baby, like he's probably not going to want to go to another team and go through that all again. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine he is done. Now, maybe there's a line in coaching. Maybe there's a line to coaching at least, or um, there's when we say that possibilities are endless for this guy, like they truly are endless. He has the full relationship with Cal and Hannah and everybody in that front office. The guy is, like you said, whether it's governor, mayor, it could be anything within the organization. Um, he he could do what he wants. It's crazy to think that, like, even with Dre and how good he was, last year was his first time being able to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he wasn't a surefire, like whatever it was. Um, he wasn't able to get in first time. JJ Watt will be the first Houston Texan to get into the Hall of Fame with the first try, with the first application. He will be the first to be submitted in the Hall of Fame as a Texan. Well, Andre might get there before him, but he'll be the first one to do it in the first year he's eligible.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. There was a stretch of football where, I mean, we actually had, was it 2014, where there was the argument whether or not it should have been Aaron Rodgers or J.J. Watt as MVP. And the fact that that was even an argument, even though you knew that there's no way a quarterback is not going to win MVP, that's how good of a season J.J. had. Was it 2014?
Yeah.
But it was just
2014 was like he was up for MVP. Like he was against, I forgot who it was that won it that year. I think it was a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers. That's right. Aaron Rodgers. But statistically, he had every reason to be considered. And I think he finished second, right?
I don't know what he actually finished. I just remember having the argument with a Packers fan that J.J. Watt should have been MVP. And of course, in their mind, Aaron Rodgers can do no wrong, especially back then.
Fair.
But I do remember having a fairly heated argument. The fact that a quarterback just, granted, they used my own logic against me, but quarterbacks, the MVP shouldn't just be a quarterback role or award. I think that the way that you kind of look at it, of course, it naturally gravitates towards them. But that season with the Texans, I believe there was Arian out that year? This was like year 1 or year 2 of Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't think Bill ever got a full season with Arian.
Yeah, so either Arian was out or hurt most of the season. Jadeveon Clowney was hurt. And JJ essentially took a situation where he was going to make sure that we made the playoffs that year.
Yeah,
and it was the year before the Watt Cat, because I remember the Watt Cat. Like, why the hell didn't they just let him up tight end? He had 2 scores the year before, and then we completely forgot that he could do that. I mean, JJ, just the impact that he had from a position that is not normally talked about, the way that it was talked about with him, in my mind, should have been the MVP. Like, we don't make the playoffs without him. We are not even we were slightly above mediocre, but we would have been on the bad side of mediocre without JJ. Like, there was the I think it was the Giants game that year where he scored the only touchdown in the game. Like, he took the ball from took either a pick six or a fumble recovery from Eli Manning, ran it back, and then continued to keep the Giants from scoring. Like, he not only stopped them from scoring, he did the scoring. JJ was just something else, especially at his peak. The only regret I have with JJ, or the only regret I'm sure anybody has, is you just sit there and imagine if you could have just gotten another year or two with him before he wore out. I mean, he sat there, and his first 4 or 5 years, he was an absolute Iron Man. Like, he never missed a game, never missed a snap. And I think he paid for it later in his career because of that. Like, maybe they should have managed his snaps a little bit better instead of letting him play the entire game like they did, especially when we weren't good. And we might have been able to squeeze another year or 2 out of him. I hate the fact that we weren't able to put everything together for him other than the one season, and then a Matt Schaub injury just ruined that. I absolutely hate that. And it's same for Andre, same for Arian Foster. Like, you sit back and you think of those 3 when they all played together at the same time for the Texans. Like, you knew that they were really good and you knew it was something special. But as we get further and further away from them, you really begin to realize how special that group was, and we didn't get them nearly as long as we should have because of injuries and just bad quarterback play.
Yeah, 100%. Bad coaching at times too. Bad decisions on the roster. Lots of little things happen here and there. It does suck when you think about what this team actually had and where it was, to go from that to where we were.
I mean,
A shitty way for his career to end with the Texans as well. With with everything that happened with Bill O'Brien to him negotiating or having the conversation about being released by with Nick Caserio and things of that nature. Like, just a lot of unfortunate circumstances. But the cool part about it was, like, it never wavered his love and pride in Houston, even when he left. It was somewhat of like a heartfelt message when he announced, that he did ask for a release and that, he wanted to go do something different, wanted to try to get a ring and things of that nature. Like, so there are so many like great moments, but you're right. Like, the fact that we never got to see it all put together on the field, never got to see what could have been in a time where there was enough talent to be able to compete. Um, it's one of those situations where you're always going to look back as a Texans fan and be like, it's a what if scenario, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were, again, maybe Houston's just kind of snake bitten. I mean, Arian Foster is one of the most talented running backs to ever play the game, and
Yeah, talent wise,
100%. I
100%.
will fight anybody on that.
I agree.
The only thing that has kept him from being a Hall of Famer was he didn't have enough healthy years.
Yeah, it's all stats.
Yeah, and I mean, he just didn't get enough. And you have a team with Andre Johnson, who slightly better quarterback, maybe a little bit different usage, or maybe not even playing in the fantasy football era, would get recognized as a top 20, maybe top 10 receiver of all time. Like, he was really good. And then you have J.J. Watt, who the only argument is whether he's top 3 or top 5 defensive of all time. And I mean, there's a legitimate argument that he had the 4 greatest defensive seasons by any player ever. And we had them all on the same team. And we really don't have anything to show from it. We don't even have an AFC Championship game appearance to show from it. And that's kind of heartbreaking. But when you look back at it, it's like, I know we didn't really appreciate it as much as we should, but just kind of like going forward, like, keep that in mind. Like, we had 3 just unbelievable talents, absolutely unbelievable talents that a lot of franchises don't ever actually quite get. They may get a lot of guys that are more a tier below, but to get 3 guys like that was definitely something special.
Yeah, I think it's it really kind of puts into perspective kind of where this team's at right now, right? Like, the fall for grace was so quick, and it was so rapid. I mean, it was never ending, right? We go back to the Chiefs game in the divisional round. Like, from that moment to now, it's really insane to think about the amount of talent that was actually on this roster. No depth whatsoever, but from a star player perspective, I mean, they were
1 or 2 players away, like 1 or 2 players. Like, if we just had a little bit of depth, another pass rusher, anybody that could have helped JJ from getting gas, just another option on offense, anything, just anything little, like one of those things, either one of them, and we beat the Chiefs. Probably the year that the Chiefs were the Chiefs at the absolute strongest. And we go from that to, orchestrating one of the worst trades of all time that really torpedoed the franchise. Because you go from being very, very close to probably an overreaction to that game, just torpedoing. We go from being on the cusp of being maybe not an elite team, but up there, competitive with them, able to beat them, to, like you said, the Browns. Like, we were gonna, if we messed it up with Deshaun Watson, is what you said, we would turn into the Browns. And the only reason we weren't is because Drafting players like Andre Johnson and J.J. Watt. Like, if you look at our list of quarterbacks, like, it was just as bad. It was just as meme-worthy as any other teams has ever been, if not more so, even more so than the Browns jersey. I think somebody did, well, look at the Texans one right next to it. But we had the other guys, specifically Andre Johnson and J.J. Watt, that kept us from being laughingstocks. And now we don't have those guys anymore. And now the roster's been misused. Guess where we're at? We're in that hole.
Yeah, and we're on the outside of it. It doesn't seem like we're in the headed in the right direction to an extent. There's really not a lot to look at and say, hey, it's we're on the right path, because there's just not a lot to build on, right? Like, you have Dameon Pierce, you have two good tackles who are both going to need contracts. You have Petrie, Stingley, like, you have the draft class. We don't know what we have in Nico. I see high upside. You don't. But that's about it, right? Like, we have a head coach who we know is not the future, and we knew was not the future the day that he was hired. We have an OC who calls games like it's 1962, and has no feel or rhythm in his offense whatsoever. No matter who's at quarterback, it really doesn't matter.
Simplest defense in the league. Like,
we played what?
Granted, the past couple of weeks it's kind of bored out, but you look at it, and I still think Stingley was the better choice than Sauce Gardner, but you would never know the way that we use them. And yeah, it's kind of tough to watch right now. Like, Dameon Pierce, like, no, he's awesome. Like, I'm glad we have him, but as long as it'll take to rebuild this roster, he won't be good at that time. Like, the style that he runs, I mean, you can't extend a running back like that, because he's too physical. He's going to wear himself out. There's going to be too many miles. But we'll get like 2 or 3 years of him where he's really, really good for us. And then it'll be kind of heartbreaking, because he's going to be another player that's put on the list of, hey, he was a really good player for the Texans and he never got to do anything. Just nature of being a running back. And then Petrie and Harris, like, maybe we'll see. But Titus Howard, I mean, they're back. I mean, he played great as guard, but is he a guard now again? Or just going back to tackle? Like, the offensive line looked better with Heck at tackle and him at guard. And again, because we don't have another guard or center. And Tunsil, I mean, I know Tunsil's a merc. He'll do anything for the money. But are we really going to pay him what he wants to? Like, we're so far away.
I think we are. He wants to be here. He's already come out and said it. Like, there's been reports from people. There's been reports from people that he's signing here. He's going to sign an extension here. That I trust. So yeah, I mean,
maybe.
Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't
he? Until it happens. Like, I mean, again, he's one of those. Him and Howard, like, offensive linemen, good offensive linemen. They can be good for a very long time, and you can keep them along for a long time. And if almost out of any of the team players we just listed, the guys that would most likely be here through a rebuild are those two. Even though Stingley and Petrie are younger, just Petrie at his size and Stingley just playing corner, like, sometimes they flame out.
No, sure, but I think at the end of the day, like, where I was going was the fact that, like, outside of draft picks, there's really, like, not a lot. Like, there's excitement because we have draft picks, we have capital, and we have cap space, right? But, like, if we don't have the right head coach, like, what are those things really worth, right? Like, you can have draft picks, but, like, if the coach is Lovie Smith, like, what good are those draft picks? What good is that cap space? What good is Dameon Pierce? Like, and so what's the point?
Well, that was kind of my point earlier this season when I was saying that Caserio should go too. It isn't necessarily because I think that Caserio has done a horrible job. I don't think he's done a great job. I think he's probably done an above average job. But with these picks, like, especially this year, this is going to be our strongest pick year, because the Browns are really bad. We're going to get at least another top 15 pick out of it, maybe another top 10 pick out of it, because the Browns are just bad.
Well, we could also get the top 5 pick next year. I mean, you just never know. He could tear his Achilles in game 1 of 2023. Like
That is true.
there are so many different ways that this could go.
Yeah, and I mean his contract is such an albatross, but especially if he plays like this. But regardless, like if safe money is this is going to be the draft class. Like this is it. Like this is going to be the draft class that we have the most draft capital in. This is the one that you don't want to screw up. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this is more with Caserio and his coaching hires. Lovey has not been good. And I think the fact that we had last year where we had the avatars with the beards, like we sat there and we tried to defend Lovey, and it just felt like we were making excuses instead of trying to truly be positive. Like we were trying to be positive. We were trying to be excited, knowing that it was going to be a rebuild. We were trying to be bought in because, watching football, this is all supposed to be fun. We don't want to say, hey, this is horrible from the beginning. But we all kind of sort of knew. And everybody knew that Cully was going to be a disaster. Everybody knew Cully was going to be a bridge coach. But that's part of the reason that I'm kind of lost faith on Caserio. Like he may be a good talent evaluator. We may have solid drafts under him, but he's done nothing in free agency really to speak of.
Really? Nothing?
I mean, nothing overly impressive. Like we go for Kyle Allen, who we all knew was crap as the backup quarterback, which served to no purpose whatsoever. It's one thing.
It also didn't cost anything.
Well, right. But in my opinion, with the backup quarterback, they should have gone one or two ways. They should have gone just like a young, like wild card, either drafting somebody like the other guy that, why am I blanking on his name right now, that New England got, that he probably won't be any good, but.
Right. So waste an asset. But
well, no, not necessarily, because you don't know. What was the name of what's the backup quarterback's name in New England now?
I don't know. Could have took Mr. Irrelevant, sure.
But you do something like that. You draft another rookie, another dart throw. It's not a wasted asset because you don't know how they're going to turn out until they actually play. Or you go with an older quarterback to truly mentor Davis Mills, somebody that's similar play style, somebody that could come in and help him develop.
Yeah.
And they did neither. Yeah, Bailey's
and spend that money.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to spend a lot. Like you're spending the same amount that you spent on Kyle Allen, who doesn't look like. I mean,
so like who?
He's going to be coaching.
So like who would have been brought in to be that guy?
At this moment, I don't know. But that was kind of like my point. But what was the point of going after somebody like Kyle Allen? What was the point of bringing Rex Burkhead back? Like, what's the point of that? Now, defensively, defensively better.
I get the Burkhead.
I mean, with Nelson and but with Steven Nelson
and the edge rusher from the Rams and Jerry Hughes and Malik Collins I mean, he's actually hit on quite a bit of free agents that people just seem to just not want to bring up for some reason. It's a bit strange.
I mean, they're good compared to whom's around them. Is what I would say. Like we were so bad against the run. How can you say that our defensive line was a win?
Sure, but you want them to sign Chandler Jones
we were on track for having one of the worst run defenses of all time again this year.
Sure. So they should have gave like $145 million to Chandler Jones instead.
No, I'm just saying that. What was?
I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, what do you do then?
I'm saying, what's the point? Like, what's the point of going after these older guys that really don't contribute and aren't going to develop?
Well, I mean, the edge rusher from Okawalbi or whatever, like that guy's developing into a nice little pass rusher. He's a young guy. He's like 26. Steven Nelson's only 29, and he's having his best year at corner.
I mean, regardless, so one or two hits. Like
out of how many?
Exactly.
But I guess that's what I'm saying. Like Ogbomanale, that running great, but
that talent. We have offensive side of the ball, probably the least talented group of receivers in all of football. The fact that Jordan Akins was cut and then brought back and is now probably one of our best offensive receivers at tight end.
What does that say?
Again, yeah, exactly. What does that say? And again, this isn't necessarily to say everything with personnel is that Caserio's done. I'm not saying that he's done a horrible job of personnel. I'm saying that there's a lack of plan and the coaching hires have been an absolute disaster. So, in my opinion, regardless of that side, just because we have to bring in coaches to develop the draft picks that we're going to have, who's going to select right coaches to develop this next group? And is that something that we definitely trust Caserio with? Let's just say he has a positive record on personnel between draft and free agency. Let me just say I'll concede that. He definitely does not with coaching. And
he definitely doesn't?
He does not. Not with the coaching. Now, you're going to say that, oh, well, he didn't have a choice in these coaches. These were pushed upon him by McNair. And
no, forced upon him by the guy that signs his check, but sure.
Yeah. Well, that's also his job to push back. Like, that is his job to navigate that as the GM. Like,
and
if your boss comes in and says, hey, we're going to do this, and you're like, this is a bad decision. This is a bad look. And Nick may not have wanted Lovey, but Nick put himself in a position where Cal could come in and say, we're going to take Lovey.
So in your career, have you ever met a boss that says this is it and this is my decision?
Usually, first off, I'm not a general manager of a NFL franchise. Like, my decisions much different.
So we don't know how it works, right?
But
if we're not that.
Yeah, but for major decisions, I've had bosses come in and said, "Hey, let's do this," and I have had the ability to push back. And it
changed their mind?
Yeah, actually I have.
Everybody has. But it's not something that, like, it's all determined by the person that is bringing that up, right? The guy that writes the check ultimately is able to have final say, right?
In this situation, I would say it's Caserio put himself in a corner by not having a solid option after Cully.
So you think that even though they interviewed Gannon, McConnell, all the top candidates that he interviewed, he just did that because he didn't do that because he thought that they'd have a good replacement or a good option moving forward. It was just
he interviewed all those guys and he ended up with Lovie Smith.
He ended up with Lovie Smith?
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't know. It's a flawed logic. I'm kind of surprised by it because, like, at the end of the day, the owner is the owner.
Yes.
No matter how much you push back, no matter how much you persuade him, he has final say no matter what. It doesn't matter. And so if his whole point was to get rid of a racial lawsuit by a black coach, and that was his entire prerogative, and that was his whole reasoning, along with the fact that his dad wished he would have hired Lovey over Bob, and we saw how Bob left the team. Like, if the owner wants to make a decision and you can't convince him, you can't convince him. I don't really understand, like, how that's Nick's job to convince the guy who runs the franchise and cashes the checks and is the one that checks the P&L. Like, Nick can only do so much. If Cal says this is what we're doing and there's no conversation about it.
Why were we in that position where Cal would have to come down like that? That is
what do you mean?
Why were the Texans in that position where Cal would have to say, we're going to take Lovey? Why? Like, why? Because when he hired Nick Caserio, he said that he had full control over hiring his own coach.
Yeah.
He had
owners don't lie.
They don't lie. They definitely do lie.
Right.
Bosses definitely do change their mind. And with this situation, when you look back at it, it was because of the way, A, the Cully hire went. B, it was Gannon backing out because Caserio said that he gets to hire the assistants.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you paint yourself into a corner where you end up with owner mandate that we're just going to take this guy. And I think that if it was navigated better, we don't. Or if maybe we don't hire Cully. Maybe if there was a little bit more outside the box thinking. Instead, he brought in Cully sitting there thinking, part of the reason he brought in Cully is because he could hire the assistants.
Well, and because nobody else wanted the job.
Yeah. Well, that he interviewed. There's somebody out there that would have taken an NFL head coaching job.
Yeah, Coley did.
Yeah.
D'Amico turned him down last year. So you say this every year that nobody's going to turn down a job, but D'Amico declined interviews and stayed as a DC. And this actually happens more often than people claim.
Somebody will take the job.
Yeah, Coley did.
Yeah, but there could have been obviously there was better options out there.
But if there, what do you mean obviously?
Because look at how bad Cully was.
Right, but I mean, but if nobody else would take the job, how can you say that obviously there was? It's been reported by people who were in that, in there.
Interviewed would take the job. There's other coaches out there. That's where you think outside the box instead of going for somebody that is obviously going to be a bad, or regardless if we think it's obvious or not. I mean, he made that decision. He decided to go with Cully. He didn't expand the net. He didn't look for somebody else. He didn't try and present the job in a way that would be more appealing to somebody else.
What's appealing about that team? What's appealing about your quarterback wanting to quit and also be traded after having 26 allegations of sexual assault, also while having no roster depth whatsoever? Let's talk about the 3 previous drafts that he inherited no player personnel whatsoever on this roster. It was probably the worst roster in the NFL, hands down. You have no cap space whatsoever. You have no first-round pick. You have no second-round pick. I understand what you're saying. There are 32 head coaching jobs. I get it. I understand that. But you fuck that up, and you don't have another chance either way. If you fuck up there, and you're done in 2 years or a year, you're not going to be another NFL coach. Josh McDaniels is a very, very rare situation where you get another chance as a head coach. You don't get them. So if you can stay as an OC and continue, or a DC,
how many times has Lovie Smith been a head coach now? 3?
Right, but he has success in the league, though.
I mean, but he's also gotten fired twice before.
But did he have success? I mean, he went to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but he also got fired. So I mean, it does happen where if you're in that. So what happens is once you're in that box, they recycle the same players. All I'm saying is Caserio could have thought outside the box. And again, this isn't me saying that Caserio has done a horrible job. This is saying, do you really trust him to bring in a coach and a coaching staff that will develop all these draft picks?
Yeah, because you're coming off very Rivers and McCown right now. Yeah, I absolutely, because I haven't seen anything not to. All the reports of people who are in the know that were a part of the conversations and have information have stated both of those very clearly, that Coley was the only one that would take the job, and that Lovie was hired by Cal specifically. Nick did not have a choice. Because if that was the case, they wouldn't have gone through all those interviews to have Cal just say Lovie is it. It makes, if you just look back at the way that everything happened, it's impossible for that to be the case.
He went through all those interviews
to find his guy.
And Cal gave him the chance to find somebody, and he couldn't. That's why they had all those interviews, to try and get one of those guys. And he couldn't.
Sure. And I don't really know what else to say. I guess so. Fire Nick. I don't really give a fuck.
We just have to agree to disagree on. But my point is that Caserio put us in that situation. Okay, whatever. And, okay, whatever. My point is, so Cal made us hire Lovie. Because Nick couldn't find the head coach. Or Nick couldn't get somebody hired before the Flores lawsuit. Or whatever. Now Nick is probably going to have to hire another head coach. And are we confident that he's going to hire the right guy to develop these draft picks? That is my point.
I don't have any reason not to believe that.
I am not currently, but you may be.
Based on the candidates he's interviewed, I have no reason to think that he's not looking for a younger, innovative head coach based on all just candidates.
See, if Nick wanted Josh McCown,
he didn't want Josh McCown. That was Jack Easterby.
If that was true, would you have been happier with Josh McCown over Lovie?
Hands down.
Really?
Hands down. Yeah, because I don't know what he can do. There's an unknown aspect to Josh McCown. There wasn't an unknown aspect to Lovely. We just saw him run our defense for the year prior. We knew what to expect. With Josh, it's just a complete unknown. He could be great. He could be bad. He could be mediocre. He could be average. All results are open at that point. It could be whatever. When it comes to hiring, I don't really give a fuck about experience. I really don't. I can give a shit about experience. Are you a constant learner? Do you care? Are you passionate about what you're going to be doing? And can you lead people? If you can do those things, you can do anything you want to do. Yeah. You can learn the game of football, right? Like all these writers and blog people, let's talk about like Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, they all are self-taught how to scout. Mm-hmm. They're no different. Anybody can learn anything in this world. So I really don't care about it.
A lot of these guys that we listen to about football, they're not even good at understanding football. They're just good at presenting their opinions. Now, that Nick Caserio, the username in chat, actually is kind of the whole point. Nick Caserio played hardball with Gannon over choosing the assistants. I think Gannon would have been the best of the group. And he did the same thing with Kevin O'Connell, who's going to win Coach of the Year for the Vikings. Same thing.
Well, he also did the same thing with Bieniemy.
He played hardball with both. And that's why, I mean, of course, we probably wouldn't have gotten O'Connell regardless because the Vikings are just in a better spot. And then with Gannon, he played hardball, so Gannon withdrew his name. Where, I don't know.
I think we dodged a bullet with Gannon, but that's just me. But I can understand. I don't think anybody actually knows whether any of them will be good or great. It's just like doing any other hiring. It's a risk no matter what. You hope you hit. Sometimes you miss. But from what I've heard about Gannon, it doesn't seem like he would be what Texans fans are looking for or what that locker room is looking for. But at the end of the day, like it was another reason why they didn't get Bieniemy the first year and they settled on Coley because he did not want Bieniemy wanted like roster control. Mm-hmm. Why the fuck would you give a rookie head coach roster control?
And I understand pushing back on that.
And I also understand Gannon wanted the same thing.
That, but a head coach should be able to choose his own staff. Like I get the pushback,
unless you can't.
Because to me, ultimately, that argument, what that says to me is that the fact that they're having friction over that, and this is both with Bieniemy and O'Connell and Gannon, all of them, is if these sorts of things keep coming up, it's the way that the interviews are going because these things shouldn't be black and white. I have roster control. You have control of your staff. Like these things should be done together as a team, as a partnership.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm saying like
that keeps popping up. Says there's a way that those interviews are going that leads down a path that's almost contentious, where they think that there isn't going to be a back and forth.
Well, I also think that like a lot of people assume that these coaches can fill their coaching staff, and not all coaches have been like Joe Brady. I remember when Joe Brady was a candidate, everybody was talking about, well, how the fuck is he going to fill a coaching staff? He doesn't have the relationships to be able to do that. Like those things do come up. I do also want to say, and this is something I've been bringing up on the timeline quite a bit too. Like everybody wants to fucking shit on Nick, which I get it. There are things that he has done that are like, why the fuck? Why is Rex Burkhead on the roster? Like that's the one thing I'll always agree on. It makes no sense. Totally understand it. But like everybody acts as if there is a blueprint for how to navigate this rebuild, and that everybody acts as if one rebuild is like the other rebuild and like the other rebuild and like the other rebuild. There has never in the history of the NFL been a rebuild like this one that Nick inherited. Nothing. There's not been one time where you've had a sexual assault allegations by 27 different women, no cap space, no first round picks. You had a fucking chancellor or whatever the fuck Jack Easterby was, crowd, like,
yeah.
Like, this is not like where you can just go look at the $86 and be like, well, hey, this is how they did it, or the 2021 Bengals and say this is how they did it. It's not the way it works. You can't just go and say this is how they did it, this is how we're going to do it. Each rebuild has its own resources and lack of resources to be able to go through. So anybody that thought that we should have seen like some massive improvement this year, I think is you have to wonder if they know anything about the game, because what could they have done? There's really not much they could have done. Yeah, they could have got the coaching hire right? And sure, what if Gannon was the wrong guy and he gave them all that shit? Like, what if, like, there's just so many unknowns. Like, you can't have revisionist history and be like, hey, if I didn't go to the grocery store that day, I would have gotten into a car accident. Like, shit happens. But at the end of the day, when you look at what he's inherited, I think he's actually navigated this in a way. Like, if he listened to media and fans, he would have gotten half the price for Deshaun Watson than what he actually got. But that didn't happen. He waited till settled, and was able to get the most out of him. Now they're going to have a top 10 pick and a top, like, there's just things that people seem to miss. Mm-hmm. And while I get it, UDFAs would have been great. You can't have a roster of Walmart players and just hope that they develop.
Well, right now, you're right on probably 99. Like, I think we're in agreement on 99% of everything you said. Like, no rebuild is the same. Nothing is the same. There is so much luck that goes into finding the right mix to get a championship level team. Nothing is guaranteed. You can look back on it, and it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback to look back on the results and critique it. So I don't disagree with you on any of that. My issue comes from the fact that right now, when we knew we were going to be bad, this is when you throw dart throws. This is where you try and find those cheap Walmart players, because you have no other choice. But we didn't. We just kind of sort of gave up. You also try and find somebody that's going to control your organization and control people. And I think Caserio, who may be gifted when it comes to talent evaluation, because there's a lot of people that just love what he does with talent evaluation. But here's also the thing. A lot of that talent evaluation is done by the scouts and a scouting department and football guys that were put in place way back when, by Kubiak, by Rick Smith. Like, these guys, like the
Caserio got his own guys, right?
Some of them, like at the top, but like
it was like
actual local level and things like that. Like, a lot of these guys have been with the Texans for a while. Like, he replaced the top, but just like I'm talking about, like the regional guys, like a lot of that stuff when they talk about institutional knowledge is because some of these smaller scouts that get paid next to nothing, they stay with the team for years. And again, but regardless, that's like taking me completely off my point, is he doesn't have to be great at personnel. What he has to be great at is managing the other egos in the room. We already saw how that crashed and burned with Bill O'Brien. Having the biggest ego in the room destroyed the franchise. Now, with Caserio, I'm not saying that he is Bill O'Brien. I am saying that I am concerned with the fact that the things that come out are he's getting forced to do things, or he's trying to get coaches to do things his way. Whereas right now, what we need are guys that are going to come in and develop what could potentially be a great draft class. Or we get to do what you've said before, is we get to continue to be the Browns. Like, I look back a couple of years ago where the Browns had all those first and second round picks, where they drafted who was it? Ward and Johnny Manziel in the first round. Like, we're not the first team to have multiple first round picks, but it is possible to still mess it up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%.
And I think everything you said about a leader is right. Every single thing. Like, he's got to be able to look at all the other opinions in a room. Ultimately, what makes a leader or somebody like a general manager, a strong general manager, is knowing what people to listen to, what people to tune out, what people to promote, what people to get rid of. Not necessarily what draft picks to make.
Just FYI, every single person on the scouting team is brand new from when Caserio was hired.
Oh, really?
Yeah, literally everybody. I just Googled all of them on the Texans website. So James Lipford came when Nick Caserio was hired, and he's the assistant director of player personnel and college scouting director And then he hired his own directors of pro scouting and pro scouts, national scouts, and area scouts. But either way, I get what you're saying. I think it's very easy to shit on Nick Caserio with everything that's going on and say, well, Mills is bad, so therefore let's blame Nick. The offense is bad, let's blame Nick. I don't know. Coaching mishires, like, I probably wouldn't have fucking took that job, to be honest with you. Like, why the fuck would I want to tie my name to the worst roster in the NFL? So yeah, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, I do believe that it's also if they get rid of Lovey or if they promote Lovey, right? Like, it's all ifs at this point. Lovey could be back next year. Pep could be back next year. There's no surefire anything.
No, I mean, it actually wouldn't surprise me at all if Lovey's back next year.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Also, the director of pro personnel was hired by Caserio as well.
Yeah. Top level,
all of
those get churned, but usually, like, area scouts, like, they've been with the organization in some form or fashion before. Now, of course, I could be wrong because I was taking that off hearsay instead of actually looking it up. But like area scouts and things like that, the guys that go to the games, the guys that are essentially sending back information so higher ups can make decisions on where to put resources, those are usually what's within NFL teams. They stay the same regardless of who leaves and who goes. I can't find the actual list here or their bios, but
it's right here. If you just Google front office, it pulls them all up, and then you can go to their LinkedIn and you see how long they've actually been there. But yeah, I don't know. Because usually what happens is when these guys, when GMs come in, they hire their own director, they hire their own assistant director. Those guys then bring in their scouts on the national level, and then sometimes the local scouts, right? So Texas, right? They may stay because they've been in Texas for a while. But like, if you look at the players we've drafted, that kind of doesn't really matter. Your point of like having the same guys when nobody from Texas is being drafted. But yeah, so like Bailey Brown too, another one. But yeah, anyways, so the future of Texans Unfiltered as we wrap up. You and I haven't really talked about this, so but you're used to this stuff just kind of coming up spur of the moment, anyways, and then usually just say okay. So they want us back, John.
Yeah.
I miss doing it. I don't know if I can do it again if Lovie Smith is the head coach next year.
I mean, I don't know. We've kind of talked a little bit off before. A lot of it is just getting the energy to do it when it feels like you're doing the same thing over and over again. And maybe that's also what's colored some of my views on Caserio specifically. Is it just feels the same. Like, it doesn't feel like we're truly getting any traction. Like, it's one thing to talk about a team that's bad when there's things worth talking about. And some of our highest rated shows have been when the coaches get fired. And when the coaches get fired.
Yeah.
People like the drama. But when you come in and then you see the results, especially this year, the first couple of weeks, where the last thing we wanted was things to take a step backward. And when you saw that was absolutely heartbreaking. If they brought back the entire same coaching staff next year, it'll be really hard to get excited about that. But
yeah,
we'll see. At the same time, like, going up towards the draft, like, that's going to be exciting. Like, again, we have so much draft capital. And if this was a normal year, honestly, like everything I said about Caserio right now, just ignore. If it was a normal year, I'd be like, whatever, give him another year. My fear is you look at other teams that have this great big draft class coming up that didn't make changes to their front office, that didn't have front office coaching staff alignment, where you have a front office and coach, regardless of who came first, but we're looking for the same type of players, like grew up with the same system, that had the same belief in analytics and like size wise. Like when you have those alignments, they do really well with draft classes. Now, when you don't have those alignments, I mean, then it's more of a crap shot. Like we don't know. And that's ultimately my fear with Caserio. Like this is the draft class to get right. If he gets this one right, we're going to be competitive again, and we'll be competitive again sooner rather than later. If he gets this one wrong, or if we get guys that just don't develop, then we're going to be Lions, Browns, we're going to be Jaguars, those teams that are perennially at the bottom. Like in my mind, that's how much pressure is on this specific draft class. Because again, there's some of these teams that are at the bottom, they just stay in the bottom every year because they're afraid to change up their coaching staff, or not necessarily their coaching staff, their front office specifically. Like they'll go through coaches left and right. Like they don't care. They'll fire a coach every other year. Like go look at the Jaguars history, go look at the Lions history, go look at the Browns history. Until they started making changes in their actual front office and football operations, they didn't start to get better. And that is my fear.
Yeah, I agree with you to an extent. Yeah, I don't know if I like the comparisons to the Browns because the Browns have never really been good. But yeah, I mean, look, yeah, and they're probably not going to ever. They're probably never going to be good. Deshaun does not look like he's good at football anymore. I don't know if it's the mental thing for him.
Well, it looks like he lost just the feel for the game.
Yeah, he's used to being loved. I forgot who tweeted it out. Somebody tweeted it out, and it was a very good tweet. When you grow up being loved and adored and rooted for your entire fucking life, and then out of nowhere, you are now victim or villain number one, and you are hated by an entire. I mean, outside of Cleveland, really.
Even
you are fucking
like
and even in Cleveland, right? Yeah. Like you are hated, and you can't go anywhere. I mean, the rest of your life, the tweets, the videos, the skits of people making fun of you and like the shit you did. That's never going to go away. That is the rest of this motherfucker's life for forever. It is forever going to be what he is associated with. All the rest of the shit he did in high school and college, that shit doesn't matter at all now. Nobody gives a fuck. All they care about is what you just fucking did. And to go from what he was to where he's at now and be hated at the level he is, it has to take a toll on you mentally, no matter how strong you are. It has to. And you have to wonder if that's what's affecting his play.
It's possible.
Because there's really no other reason for his play to be affected. Offensive line is better than what he's ever had. Play calling isn't terrible. He has weapons. He has a great run game. Like, I think they're down like 10 points on what they were averaging on offense with Jacoby Brissett. Like, there are some real questions happening in Cleveland. And, you know, you don't want to wish that a fan base is fucked for forever, or at least for the next 5 years. But I swear to God, I fucking hope that motherfucker never gets it right.
Yeah.
And I hope he gets picked off and gets fucking pegged again like he did this last week, every week for the rest of his fucking life. Did you see that play, that clip?
Mm-hmm.
Where he got fucking leveled. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because this team might not be good at all next year.
That is true. They may have all that talent and everything that they put together down the drain.
Well, yeah, because they're not going to be able to retain anybody either.
Yeah, because they're the villains of the NFL.
Yeah,
you absolutely nailed it. If when you said that if Deshaun did not want to be the villain when he came back. He needed to stay in Houston.
That was the only way.
Houston would have rallied around him. The way the city is, like if he'd come back, asked for forgiveness, and just the city would have rallied around him like no other. And I hate to say it because everything just around it's disgusting. But he burned bridges both ways. Like he just destroyed his brand by trying to go to Cleveland. And somebody also was pointing out that Mike Vick went to jail for 2 years and he came back and he was a better quarterback. Well, he came back and he was a better passer.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was a better quarterback.
He wasn't a better player. He also came back in that offense that just had him throwing the ball a bunch with Chip Kelly.
But he wasn't a better player. He was maybe a better thrower of the ball.
Right. Whereas Deshaun just looks absolutely lost. Like he played the game with feel. Like he just had great football instincts. Like he could be scattershot 1 minute, the next minute he could be the most accurate quarterback in the league. Like that's always how he was. But he just had a feel for the game, almost like he was playing basketball instead of football.
Yeah.
And right now he does not have that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
He was away from the game for a very long time. So
yeah, he was.
I think that would be the ultimate karma if the Browns never go to the playoffs while he's on their roster.
I think it'd be fucking amazing. I can't wait. And honestly, I don't expect anything good to come from it. The other thing that I did want to mention, and the one thing I will say about like the coaching situation and kind of what happened here, I will say that you have to put a new coach in this year because you are risking, and it's kind of off of what you were saying, you're risking at this point the development of all the picks that you're drafting is what it boils down to, right? Like, okay, so the defensive players we drafted, we didn't really ruin their development this year because they were transitioned into a Lovie Smith defense, right? So, anybody we had last year going to this year, they were not impacted. They learned, right? Derek Stingley, a lot of people are very worried about Derek Stingley. To be honest with you, I actually like what they're doing with Derek Stingley. I think coming from being a press man corner all in college to learning how to play zone in a zone-heavy league, I think it's going to do numbers for him towards the end of his career. It's going to give him the opportunity to be a true corner, not a true one-dimensional corner.
No, I get that, and I mean it's probably going to extend his career because playing zone is easier on.
Look at Richard Sherman. Yeah, look at Richard Sherman.
It's easier on your body. It's not easier to play zone than it is to play man. It's easier on your body. You don't have to be as fast. You don't have to rely on your athleticism as much. And I would even push back and say that with the one good thing about Lovie and Lovie Smith, his defense is so freaking simple. Everybody runs Tampa 2. Everybody runs Tampa 2. Nobody runs it to the extent that we do, but everybody runs it in times and places. But they don't rely on it singularly in the way that we do. So it's not going to set anybody back because they're just going to know their zones when they switch into Tampa 2, the 10% of snaps instead of the 70% of snaps. But every team still uses Tampa 2 in some form on certain downs on certain plays. So, for everything with Lovie Smith, like that's not going to hurt the development. Not on the defense. Like they're going to know their zones. And that's part of the reason why it wouldn't surprise me if he's even back. Because again, it is a good building block for them to all learn whatnot, if that's how you believe in teaching. What I get really concerned about is the offensive side of the ball. If Mills was actually, anything more than a third-round pick, you could almost blame his struggles on the fact that the offenses keep changing. Like three offenses in 3 years. I mean, you go from a college to the Tim Kelly one to a Pep. Like that usually sets players back, and next year he'll probably have another one. So that would typically set a player back. That's the excuse they always make for first-round quarterbacks that don't take off because look at how many offensive coaches they go through. But that in general, especially on the offensive side of the ball, like they will have to make a change. And if they don't get it right in an offensive-driven league, that's especially if we draft a quarterback. Like that's part of what also comes back to it. If we have another draft, or if we trade back out of the first pick because we don't love any of these quarterbacks and just go all defense, this could be Caserio and Lovie Smith again. Like I don't fear them messing up defense, but the offensive side of the ball, I am nervous. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think we'll see.
I would even present the fact that if you look back at the New England, what they always struggled to do is find wide receivers. They just didn't value them in the right way, I guess. I don't know. They didn't know how to scout them. I don't know. But that's trended over so far. So I don't know. Like, that's what scares me.
Yeah, I think I think at the end of the day, you can't. No matter what, defense, offense, it doesn't matter if with these high picks, and I don't want to say guarantees, but you have a much higher probability of hitting on your first round picks than you do in the latter rounds. You can't change scheme and coaches too often, or else you will hurt their development. I mean, we see it year after year in the NFL. It happens all the time. Not only that, you also have the coaching aspect of I don't want that player. That player does not fit my team, does not fit my defense, does not fit my offense. He's not the type of player I want on my team. Like we see those things happen all the time, specifically at quarterback. In the past, we've seen it a ton where the coach doesn't want the quarterback. He wants his guy. So that's probably the biggest concern I have, and that's kind of why I feel like we have to go that route of getting a head coach this offseason. But we'll just have to wait and see. All right. I have to go, but I want to say this before.
Yep. To that point, is coaching absolutely does matter, and talent absolutely does matter, because everybody was so quick to get rid of Jalen Hurts and Tagovailoa until they got the right coaches. Now all of a sudden, they aren't so quick to want to get rid of those guys.
Yeah, no, 100%, and that's that's another conversation for another day. But I agree with you in pertaining to the Mills situation. But sure, 100%, you're right. Coaching matters. It's so much. If you just look at the league, the winning organizations are the ones with the best coaches, not the best players, not the best rosters. The ones with the best coaches are the ones that tend. This is really a coach and quarterback driven league more than anything else, and you got to get this right.
Teams that have the best coaches and you know nothing about their front office. When you actually, the average fan knows absolutely nothing about the front office. Yep. As a non-coach GM, I think Caserio might be the most well-known in the league. Everybody knows Caserio, which surprises me how many fans of like the Titans and all that, they know our GM's name.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back for the draft or prior to the draft. And we'll be swinging back into full motion come draft time, off season, all of that. So we'll get back to normal. We're going to rework some things, see what else we can do to really better the product for you guys. But with that being said, if you guys aren't following us, follow us on Twitter at HoustonFV Pod. Follow me at Young Ari _gold, and then you can follow John at John A Wade 3. You can follow the podcast, the YouTube, all of that. Just search Texans Unfiltered. We're everywhere. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys during the draft. I hope you guys all have a great new year, and we'll see you all soon.